Well, hello everyone and happy holidays. Whatever holidays you may celebrate this time of year, I wish you delicious ones. And I'm just so thrilled you could join me. You know I love to see where you're joining me from by popping a little note to me on the chat thread. This is the last Oh Yum live stream for 2022. And I have such an exciting holiday recipe to share. Of course, I have to say my hellos to everyone and festive greetings to Mom and Dad and Michino and Craig and Kathy. I know you're joining. Raf, we always see you on. Bonnie down the street. Suzanne, you might be joining us too. So I wish everyone the best. And I'm really excited about this recipe. Is it true that this is now what I will be serving to my friends and family over the holiday season? 100% yes. I am making a beautiful lime chiffon cake and then frosting it with a raspberry Swiss meringue buttercream, arranging a raspberry wreath on top so it looks so pretty and festive. And if you're not celebrating Christmas, or you are on the other side of our planet in the south and it is a warm Christmas for you, well, I think the color and flavors also suit warm weather just as well. I see, we've got people writing about the snowstorm rolling through Utica, New York. We've got people from Singapore and Australia. This is fantastic. And you know what? I saw a note from Vancouver. The snow you got 3 days ago, well, it's heading our way overnight. Let me get right into this recipe because I've got a lot to do in our hour together. The first thing I'm going to do is make the chiffon cake. First thing, I have my 10 egg whites already separated and in my mixer. They're at room temperature, which means they're gonna whip to a higher volume. I'm adding 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar to the egg whites. This is acidity in a dry powder form. Do I actually need 2 teaspoons to get the best volume out of my egg whites? Not really, but because I really want to bring out a nice tart, tangy lime flavor in this cake, well, that means I'm adding extra cream of tartar. And before I start my mixer, because I need to whip this on high speed before I add my 1/4 cup of sugar, I want to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Rolling Meadow Dairy, who provided the yogurt and the butter I'll be using in this recipe. So let me get back to mixing my egg whites. Another reason you want to whip using room temperature egg whites is if you are adding sugar, you want that sugar to dissolve. If your eggs are cold, egg whites are cold, your sugar won't dissolve into them and you'll find you'll have a gritty or grainy meringue. If you're making a dessert like a pavlova and Australia, New Zealand, I'm looking at you, I know that's such a popular dessert, especially this time of year. You want those room temperature egg whites to dissolve the sugar. And everybody's sending along such great holiday greetings. That just puts me in such a good mood. We're feeling the spirit. We're saying goodbye to 2022 and inviting a wonderful new year ahead of us. So now that my egg whites are frothy, I can gradually mix in my 50 grams of sugar. So it's just a little bit of sugar. I just find adding that little bit of sugar to the whites helps while we're not making a full French meringue, just gives it a little stability because I'm doing everything in this mixing bowl. So after I whip the whites, I need to take them out, let them sit for a few minutes while I mix my other ingredients. So I want them to hold their shape. Without sugar, they would contract and collapse a little bit. Oh, you know what? Queenie, it's nice to hear from you. That is a fantastic question to ask. What's the difference between a chiffon cake and a regular sponge cake? And for that matter, what's the difference between a chiffon cake and an angel food cake? So an angel food cake, and let me stop the mixer and just check on my whites here. There's so many, being 10, that I almost need to make sure they're incorporated. I've got a nice medium peak. You don't want a stiff peak when you're making this recipe. You want room for those whipped egg whites to still grow. So back to, there's a nice, you've got a softness, a little bend to the egg white, so I know I've got a nice medium peak. Back to your question, Queenie. So a sponge cake involves whipping whole eggs together at room temperature. And an angel food cake only calls for egg whites, where a chiffon cake has, you separate the eggs, you whip the whites separately. We're going to work the yolks into the dry and liquids base and then combine the two. An angel food cake has no fat, but a chiffon cake does use vegetable oil. So I hope that answers your question. A sponge cake can have a little melted butter added to it, but it doesn't need it to be an actual, you don't have to have butter added to a sponge cake. But a chiffon cake always has oil. That makes the cake really tender and moist and flexible. And what I like about it is it stays fresh for days, because I probably won't be serving this until maybe Sunday, or it could be Saturday. So I'm just gonna set my whites aside, because now I sift my dry ingredients right into this bowl. So both parts of your recipe, if you're using a stand mixer, can be mixed into the bowl, or if you're, pardon me, let me get my train of thought back on. If you are, using electric beaters, then you could just go from one bowl to the other bowl. So into my mixer, I am sifting my cake and pastry flour, my remaining sugar, because this is a bit of a sweet cake, and I have my baking powder and salt. And I'll just give this a little sift, and while I'm waiting for that, let me grab a spoon just to push it through. I can look at some questions. You're welcome, Queenie, for answering that question. And Merry Christmas. I just love that everyone, we've got people from Australia and Toronto, and I know it is summer in Australia. You just had summer solstice. We just had our winter solstice here. I live in southern Ontario, and we have quite the storm warning, and it is pretty much a guarantee around here that we are going to have a white Christmas. For those who live in Western Canada, if you're joining me from Calgary or Edmonton or anywhere between Alberta and Winnipeg, the temperatures you've had the last couple of days, for those of you who have not experienced extreme cold, let me tell you, -40, that is extreme cold. I'm just sifting gently just so I keep all my ingredients into the mixing bowl here. And hello to Portugal. Oh, I have fantastic memories of Portugal because Michael and I were just there at the end of October. It was so beautiful. And you will be able to see an exciting new recipe of food travel diaries coming out in early 2023, inspired by that very trip to Portugal. So keep your eye out for that one. All right, so now I've got my dry ingredients in here. I can add my wet ingredients and wipe my hand off. I know I had a damp towel here. Oh, there it is. I knew I put it somewhere new, just off to the side. Just got to keep tidy here. So for my wet ingredients, I've already measured my vegetable oil into my measuring cup. And you want to use a neutral vegetable oil, not an olive oil or something with some flavor. I've already squeezed my limes. So in goes half a cup of lime juice. And now to really add a beautiful richness to the cake and can also contribute to the tartness, I'm going to measure 60 ml of yogurt into the bowl. So I'm just using displacement. So because I already have liquid in there, I just have to scoop until I see the line lift by another quarter cup or 60 ml. And let me set this over there. I saved 7 yolks from the 10 whites I separated. So you need a total of 10 whipped egg whites, but you only need 7 of the yolks. Those get added along with the zest of 3 limes. This is a big cake. This is a cake, if you're having a lot of people over, it definitely will feed a crowd. Now this can get added all together, and this is going to be the base of the cake batter that I'm then going to fold the whites into. So in this goes, And here's the whip attachment I can have back. Now, I'll start off on slow speed just so I don't spray flour everywhere. And then once it starts getting moistened, you just need to whip this on medium speed until it's kind of smooth and creamy, but you're not looking for anything technical like you were when you're whipping the egg whites. This is where I'm going to be frosting the cake at the end of this live stream, so I want to make sure I stay as clean as I can here. So just like letting the sugar dissolve into my whipped egg whites, I'm letting the sugar dissolve and everything to smooth out here. Now you notice in the recipe, I call for cake and pastry flour. We want a really tender cake with a tight but moist bubble structure. And so that's, cake and pastry flour has a lower protein content, so you really get the right texture from it. If you don't have cake and pastry flour, you can pull out a couple spoonfuls, you can use all-purpose, measure the same amount, pull out a couple of tablespoonfuls of the flour, replace that with a couple tablespoonfuls of cornstarch. That will bring your protein content down so you'll still have a tender and dense cake. And I did see a question come through, what could you use instead of plain yogurt or kefir for the tartness? Now, I don't know if you have the option of using a sour cream product, but basically what I'm looking for is a soured milk product, and yogurt and kefir are the most accessible and affordable, a great option. So I hope that gives you enough of an answer to go on. So now you can see I have, are we looking overhead, Michael? You can see I've got this smooth batter, and now I need to lighten it by adding the whites. So I'm gonna add about a third of the whites and then fold in. And I know you've heard me, if you've joined me for live streams before or have seen my other videos on Oh Yum, I always talk about how it's better to work a little more vigorously and faster than to be too careful and too slow, because the minute you start adding the whites to your base batter, time is your enemy. You need to get them in there faster. So now I can add my remaining whites. Don't they look just so pillowy and glorious? I hope I'm just as thrilled when I wake up and see the snow on the rooftops tomorrow. There we go. And now pulling from the bottom, because I know that's where the heavy batter is, I'm giving this a nice fold. Oh, this is one of those gratifying tasks. You know, there are certain things that you find so fulfilling when you're baking. For me, folding egg whites into anything, I find so satisfying. I do have cheese souffle planned to make at some point over the holidays. It's not going to be for the Christmas dinner, but I know I love making cheese souffle and I know I want to make it. Is there a special dish or recipe that any of you are going to be planning on making that you're really excited about this holiday season? And by that I mean that recipe that you know you're going to set aside the time to do it right and enjoy the process and enjoy making it for people you love. Let me know on the thread. I want to see it. Oh, Abby, I'm glad you find this so relaxing to watch. Hello from Guelph. Well, Jennifer from Guelph, has it started snowing there yet or raining? We haven't even had any rain here yet. Oh, and hello, Jenny from Venezuela. Okay, oh. Alden, thank you for your kind words. Oh, butter horns. Lisa, what a great recipe to make over the holidays. We've got lasagna being made. Chocolate mousse. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Oh, and there's T. Oh, hi, T. Thank you for joining us. T saying hi to Craig and Kathy. Cinnamon rolls. They're in the oven now. I bet it smells amazing at your house. Oh, and Jimmy, you're going to be making the stollen. I hope you're using my recipe. All of it is just, it's so gratifying. Okay, I got to get this in the oven. I've got my Angel food cake pan. It is ungreased. You want the cake to cling to the sides of the pan as it's baking so that it holds its volume. Then an Angel food cake pan is designed, I don't know if you can see this from this angle, Michael. The tube in the center is higher than on the sides so that when the cake comes out of the oven, you flip it upside down and see how there's a gap of space under here? you need to cool your chiffon cakes and angel food cakes upside down, because with all of that volume of egg, that cake is fragile, and when it's warm, if you were to cool it upright, that cake could contract and actually sink a little bit. So that's why these pans are designed this way. What I like is for a holiday cake like this, I just love the straight sides. And for a chiffon cake, it comes out easily. I don't know that you could put this in a bundt cake and have it come out the same. Look at that beautiful volume. And think of all that fresh lime juice and lime zest in there. This is going to taste delicious. Give the bowl a last scrape. And if you find your chiffon cake bakes higher than the size of your pan itself, that if you turn it upside down, it'll hit the bottom of the counter, you suspend it on a bottle. I used a barbecue sauce bottle earlier. I'm gonna pass that to you, Michael, because we need to wash this for my buttercream frosting. So I'm gonna pop this in my oven. It's a low temperature oven. I've preheated it to 160 Celsius, so 325 Fahrenheit. And you saw the size of that cake. It takes an hour to cook it. So give it a full hour. And now, Queenie, you were talking about the difference. We were talking about the differences between a sponge cake and a chiffon cake. You check the doneness of all those styles of cakes the same, not by inserting a skewer in the center, but by tapping the surface of it. And when it springs back, then you know it's cooked fully. Another reason that a cake this size has the tube is so you're getting heat at the cake from the center and from the outside so that it cooks evenly. How's everyone doing here? Oh, good, more comments. All right, you made 14 by 8 inch. Oh, you had rather widely proportioned stollen, but I'm sure they were delicious, Jimmy. Oh, that's a great question, Claude. If you wanted to make this a chocolate or another flavor, would you reduce the lime and the cream of tartar? Yes. You could replace up to half a cup of the cake and pastry flour with cocoa powder to make a chocolate chiffon, and simply remove the lime juice altogether, but replace that volume, so the half a cup, with milk. If you wanted to do a coconut chiffon, you would use coconut milk, but don't stir grated coconut in there. Now, thank you, Michael. I'm gonna give my bowl just a little wipe, just because, of course, I had the oil and the egg yolks in the bowl. I've got a paper towel with some white vinegar on it. I'm gonna give it a little wipe, so that way I know when I add my warm eggs and sugar for the Swiss meringue buttercream, I know I'll be good. So we are set here. I already have a pot with barely simmering water here, and I have more egg whites. You're gonna go through a lot of egg whites for this recipe. So if you're someone who was making creme brulee or egg yolk rich desserts earlier and you've saved your egg whites, this is a great way to use them up. And as a note, a single large egg white weighs 50 grams. So if you just keep them in a mason jar in the back of the fridge, it's easy to just put them on a scale and measure your 50 grams. No, 50 grams. Michael's asking. I did double check actually right before we started, so I know I'm good. Yes. There we go. And, oh, sorry. No, you're right, Michael. 30 grams. But let's backtrack a second. One egg white, large egg white, is 30 grams. So I've measured my 30 grams per egg white into my mixing bowl. And now I'm going to put this over the heat.
You're excited about Christmas.
I'm just worked up about Christmas. That's it. I'm ready. I'm ready. And now, whoops, I'm going to heat this up until I reach 140. So this is going to take a minute or two. You don't have to be whipping it constantly. You don't have to look for a volume at this point. So yes, I'm going to cook it bring it up to a minimum of 140 to a maximum of 150 Fahrenheit. So the maximum is 65 Celsius. And that heats the egg whites, it cooks them through, but it means you're going to get a very stable meringue. And in the world of buttercreams, I have to say the Swiss meringue buttercream is my favorite. There's the American buttercream, which is where you beat your butter and icing sugar, add a little milk or cream, and whip it up until it's frothy, but it's very, very sweet. And an Italian buttercream, on the other side, you boil your sugar, taking your life into your hands as you pour it into your whipping egg whites. It makes a really great stable meringue for a wedding cake or for fine piping detail. But I find that Swiss meringue just sits perfectly in the middle. It's got structure and stability. It's not too sweet. It's not overly greasy or heavy, and it takes on flavor so well. So this one is going to be a raspberry buttercream. Yes, Claude, Michael did make the good catch there. Thank you. And I actually double checked before I came on the live stream just to make sure I have it right. Oh my goodness. Yeah, worked up about the holidays. Just to recap, one large egg white is 30 grams, 1 ounce. So now I'm just going to get my butter ready while my egg whites warm up. I'm just keeping an eye on them now. They're getting there. A metal bowl is best for this. I'm up to 75 Fahrenheit. And I'll just cut my butter into pieces. And it takes 365 grams of butter to make this batch of buttercream. This is a good standard volume of buttercream for any multi-layer cake. I'm not doing any piping detail on this cake, but the cake itself is so large, it doesn't warrant it. And if you were making this for a more traditional, like a 20 or 23 centimeter cake, you would find that you have extra buttercream to do some piping detail on top. Happy holidays to you, Ray. I'm just going to read your question for a moment, Ray. Can you use this recipe and bake it in a sheet pan so that it can be rolled into a Swiss roll or a log for a bûche noël? Now, I haven't tried this particular recipe, Ray, to do that, but in principle, yes, it should work. There's a nice flexibility to it. I think the volume would be too big for a single sheet pan, so I would cut the proportions in half. Just knowing how many eggs it takes to make a Swiss roll fit into a pan, I think the half recipe would be a much better proportion. And hello from Powell River, BC. Sair, can I talk about my new book? I sure can. Now, you have to wait for it. It's not ready for holiday season. But what I would like to let you know is it's coming out March 14th, 2023, and it's called Baking Wisdom. So all of the information that I love to share with you here on OYUM and through these live streams, I've compacted and included in this book, including the croissant Pearson square proportion, how to calculate how to change your butterfat content in your butter to make a better croissant or better puff pastry. That you inspired me when I started doing the live streams to share that information, and now it's all documented in the book. And checked and double checked and then fact checked and then proof copied is too, so I know my information. Sometimes, as you know, I get carried away in the live streams. So always go by what the recipe says, because that has been double verified and is what I'm following. Hello from Portugal. Yes, Judy, the butter is so expensive these days. It is true. So you have to pick those recipes carefully. And what I really want to do is work hard to ensure that you're going to have success, or worst case scenario, be able to figure out how to repair or rescue a recipe that's not going well for you. That's a big part of what that new cookbook of mine is out. How to get yourself out of those baking quandaries half the time. All right, I'm getting there. My burner's really slow today. It's caught in holiday traffic and it's just stuck in a bit of a traffic jam. Oh, you should have seen the lineup at the grocery store today, because with the weather that's being threatened, everyone's trying to get their holiday shopping done right now before the weather kicks in. But I know we'll be okay. We'll be okay. Oh, hello from Sweden. Thank you for joining us. You're staying up late. Maybe doing some Christmas wrapping? Oh, Claude, I'm glad you enjoy baking day. T, your comment about my book being longer than the Harry Potter series if I put it all in. Well, let me tell you, I wrote Baking Wisdom during the pandemic. It got a lot bigger than I planned. The book itself weighs 5 pounds, so it's close. Okay, I should be getting close on my temperature here. I want to let it creep up a little bit more. So I'll take a couple more questions, or if you want to pass on your happy words. We've got a lot of people watching now, and so thank you for joining our last live stream of 2022. Yeah, lots of try. We all just have to be a little patient with each other this time of year. We're all so eager to see our friends and family, but yep, it's true. We want to be patient. Okay, I'm done being patient with these egg whites. I want to get them in. Just come on, you can do it. You can do it. Honestly, everyone, Michael, just 5 more degrees, I swear, and I'll be fine. Ooh, Michael is making a fresh strawberry charlotte. Oh, in Argentina. You know what? I was on the phone with my friends from El Gourmet in Argentina just this afternoon. They were talking about how nice the weather was, and they were actually envious of the snow. Probably only just 2 days that they're envious of our snow this time of year. So I wish you a Merry Christmas. Okay, this can come off the heat and go into my mixer. And now I'll get this whipping. So now that I've got it warm, I want to make a nice stable meringue, but also cool this down now. So away we go. This will take a couple minutes too, as it's nice and steamy hot. Of course, you don't want to add butter to a hot meringue, or it just won't, it'll melt. It'll just absolutely melt. So we don't want that to happen. No, Queenie, you don't have the snow in the Philippines. I've visited the Philippines a few times. A beautiful climate most of the time. What is Amihan season? Is that a type of storm or weather system you have? Oh, Claude, good question. Do I go crazy with Christmas decorations? Michael would probably say yes. I'm a big fan of twinkle lights. So I do little pockets around the house with decorations and twinkle lights, just because I do enjoy seeing them. You know, it gets, this time of year, it's getting dark at, what, 5 o'clock? Yeah, so the twinkle lights really help. And hello from Brazil. Happy holidays to everyone. Oh, good to know, Queenie. It is your cold season. Oh, CJ, do be careful driving. I'm glad you're home now, safe. Everyone who does have to drive, do take your time and go carefully. There we go. We're getting a nice volume to our meringue. And we're just going to wait for that to whip up tighter and then cool down a little bit before I hit it with the butter. But in the meantime, oh, hello from the UK. Oh, Jimmy is asking, is high protein flour important for the stollen? I will say, Jimmy, yes. When you're making stollen, because it's a bread and you're adding so many other ingredients between the fruit and the sugar within the recipe, that the higher protein flour helps your stollen get a little lift or volume to it, because otherwise you end up with a more dense and flatter looking bread. So I hope that answers your question. Now, Chris is asking, Oh, I'm glad you're continuing to make my pumpkin pie recipe. And you're asking about a Yule log recipe. Yes, you will find right here on the OEM channel, I've got a couple of options. And it's funny you should say that because I was talking to Michael moments before the live stream about what else I should make in addition to this chiffon cake. And I was going to do my Black Forest roulade. And so it's a flourless sponge. And what you do after you bake the sponge, you don't have to work with it while it's warm. You let it cool, and then I fill it with whipped cream and cherries, and it's just so it has all the flavors of Black Forest cake, but then it's in that bûche de Noël, the Yule log shape. So look for that recipe. It's one of my classics. It's a real favorite, so I hope you give that one a try. Ooh, I like your idea, Jimmy, of making the olive bread and the halloumi bread. Those both sound delicious. And I love that everyone's just sending such kind holiday greetings, and I'm just sending those kind holiday greetings right back. Okay, CJ, I know if you got to get back to your baking, you can always come back and watch these live streams later because the minute we're done, they get posted up right here on the channel, so you can go back and make them. Now, Jim, yes, I have made divinity candy before, which is a style of a meringue. Oh, we're coming along. I'm checking. There's only one way. You can check the temperature, and that's just by touching it. So I'm going to just let it go for about another 30 to 45 seconds before I start adding the butter. It's looking really good, though, and feels good. Yeah, divinity is so good. So if you've ever had a Three Musketeers bar or a Mars bar, that sort of frothy meringue-like but sweet candy filling in the center, that's essentially divinity candy. Oh, Shmoo, what a great candle. I'm so glad you've been watching for years. I just want to say Shmoo again, that's hilarious. Oh, good question. Alden is asking for your sponge cake for the chocolate Swiss roll. If you want a plain flavor, how do I replace the cocoa powder? You do want to look to a different scale of recipe because the cocoa has no gluten. If all of a sudden you replace it and add the flour, it can change the texture. Actually, as it happens, in Baking Wisdom, I do have a recipe for a matcha tea Swiss roll, but you have to wait 2.5 months. No, 3.5 months for it, I'm afraid. I'm trying to think if I have on this channel a traditional Swiss roll regular sponge recipe. I should. So look up Swiss roll or roulade in the search on this page, and I bet you can find it. Ooh, Tammy's asking a good question. Do I like baking with yuzu? That super tart citrusy flavor. I do love it. I can't get fresh yuzu juice here, but I can buy flavorings and I can buy it bottled. It is spectacular. Okay, I'm lowering my speed just a little bit as I'm starting to add my butter. And I always like to add my first few pieces of butter rather quickly, just to quickly make sure that meringue temperature is coming down. And you will see as you start adding the butter that your meringue will deflate a little bit. It can take a bit of time. There we go. Starting to come down a little bit and collapse. This is another one of those gratifying tasks to watch. It's a bit terrifying the first time you make a Swiss meringue buttercream because you went to all that work to get the volume in your meringue, and now you actually have to bring it back down again and deflate it. And so now I'm actually going to let it collapse a little bit. I think I need a touch more butter. There we go. It's starting to come down. Oh, Susie's asking a good question. Can this recipe be used for a chiffon cupcake? Yes, that should work just fine. Chiffon batter makes a really nice cupcake because it does come away from the paper very nicely. Oh, I get so impatient at this point. I just want it to kind of do its thing. Ah, Denise is saying she was looking at a recipe for a bûche de Noël made with black cocoa. It's the cocoa powder you find if you've ever had an Oreo cookie. That's that cocoa powder. It has a beautiful, intense color, but I will say be careful because black cocoa has a very, very low fat content. And so all I can say is, like, sometimes when you use it, your baked goods come out drier and slightly more crumbly because of the lower fat content. Even though it looks really cool, the end result isn't always the most delicious, and it isn't stronger tasting or more chocolatey. There we go. I'm getting my buttercream is starting to take shape. So all of a sudden it went from being frothy and creamy, and so now I just want to show you. I'm going to take it, put it back on the mixer for a minute. But this is always that magic moment where it goes from being fluffy and meringue-like to all of a sudden, and it tightens up, and you get that beautiful butter color. So now it will need another 30 seconds just to make sure it is smooth, and I am getting stickier by the minute here. And you'll see in the recipe, there we go. I can just tell that we are ready to go. You'll see in the recipe, I called it for 2 different ways to flavor this buttercream. You can use a straight raspberry puree, and if where you live, like where I am now, it is not raspberry season, please, 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 just use frozen raspberries. Thaw them, puree them, strain them to take the seeds out, and you use that raspberry puree as the flavor and color base for your buttercream. Or if you have access to freeze-dried raspberry powder, this is what freeze-dried raspberry powder looks like. So those raspberries have been quickly dried, and then you ground them up. So it's a fine powder. When they hit anything with moisture, like this buttercream, that powder rehydrates. It adds a beautiful color. It adds an intense raspberry flavor. You could easily do a strawberry one. So I'm going to add that. You add it dry to your mixture. And again, because I'm trying to match that lime tartness and heighten the flavor in the raspberry, even though I'm using the powder, and you'll see even if you're using the raspberry puree, I add a little bit of fresh lime juice and some vanilla extract as your background flavor. So now I'll mix this in. Oh, and immediately I can smell the raspberry. That combination, I saw someone write a note. That combination of raspberry and lime is divine. One of my other favorite raspberry and lime recipes, it's in a cookbook, but I haven't done it on the channel, so maybe there's an idea for a live stream for 2023. My white chocolate raspberry and lime cheesecake is, I've been making that for years, and it is a favorite. How's everyone doing here? We've got lots of people joining us. I see we have over 300 viewing right now. I'm glad you're taking a little time away from your holiday craziness to spend a bit of time with me so we can bake together. Now, let me just give this a scrape. So you can see you've got a beautiful, natural pink color. If you wanted to add a little more coloring, I leave that up to you, but I like how this has such a great natural color, and I can just smell that raspberry aroma in combination with the lime. So let me set this aside and bring my cake over, because of course we're not waiting for the one that's in the oven. I've already baked one up, and I've cut it into layers already. So this is what the chiffon cake looks like out of the oven, and I've cut it into 3 layers here. And you can really see how moist and soft. It's got that beautiful color. And everybody, I just love your comments today. We're getting, I love that. I feel like we're just having a great holiday visit. I'm really in the spirit. I should point out the reason I like to slice it, you could just put the buttercream on the sides, but I'll be honest, it's really hard to get a nice layer of the buttercream on the inside of the cake if you have it all in one piece. So what I like to do is add just a little layer of the buttercream. And then when you slice it, it looks so beautiful. And just take your palette knife or offset spatula, give it a good spread. It doesn't have to be a thick layer. It's always a good idea when you're using a buttercream to put on more than less. It's easier to pull off extra buttercream than it is to add more. Because if you have too thin of a layer, then you can end up pulling up crumbs as you work along. Now I've got a small palette knife, and then what I do is I use this moment, because now it's easy to reach in the very bottom, and I add just that little bit of buttercream. The first time I tried making this cake, I didn't have the sliced layers, and I was just wrestling with getting a nice layer of buttercream in the center of this cake. Spin it around. You don't need a cake wheel to do this. I'll pull off some of the excess, and there, you can see it's been tidily done. And then on goes the next layer. Give it a little press, and we'll do the same thing again. Another gratifying task, masking a cake with buttercream. When you give yourself the time and you're in the mood, does anyone play music when they bake? I always do. It can't be, I find I can't play music with too many lyrics, or I find it distracting. I go for more instrumental, but I like all types of music. Am I doing the holiday carols now? A little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay, and now I am adding frosting to the second layer, and it's easy to meet up because I already have the frosting at the bottom, and to smooth it out nicely is very simple. Now I've been paying so much attention to my cake, I haven't looked at your comments in a second, so I'll take a moment to do that. Got one little bare patch there, come on, there we go. And we're not even worrying about the sides at this point. The cake wheel, you are right, Jacques. The cake wheel does help with cutting the cake horizontally. And that actually brings up a good point. When you're slicing your cake layers, what you want to do is you don't slice from one direction to the other. You slice from the outside in. And so the cake wheel helps because as you're slicing, using a serrated knife, you're slicing inwards, 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 so then it stays nice and level. And it's easier to see where your line is as opposed to starting at one side and all of a sudden you pop out at a different place. Now, speaking of which, I need to straighten my cake up a little bit here. Okay, and so now another layer of buttercream on the top. And I'm gonna mask the top and then the sides. There we go, focused and quiet here, like a snowy night in southern Niagara. Oh, John, you say your mom likes strawberry cake. You could do strawberry just as easily. And this could be a lemon chiffon as easily as it is a lime one. A strawberry lemon would be a great combination. So now I've got a little more excess cream so I don't have to add too much. And I'm finishing up the center of this cake. So it's fully frosted. And a a final little twist around, making sure I have coverage and it looks pretty. There we go, because I am actually going to serve this to my family and friends over the holidays. This is not just for show. And now I will work. If you're in a hurry, you could put your buttercream in a piping bag and then pipe it onto the sides and then spread it. But we've got just enough time here that I am adding my cream on. And you'll see, now we want to try and get a close-up of this, Michael. As I add buttercream to the side of the cake, I don't add it here where there are crumbs. I add it to where there's already buttercream. So then when you pull, your palette knife never comes in contact with the bare cake. So you just sort of build on the buttercream that's already there as you're spreading. After a while, once you figure out a technique that works, you don't even think about it, you just do it. There we go. This is a nice fluffy Swiss meringue. And now I'll just make sure I get full coverage beneath here at the bottom. And you want to put extra on here because you can pull some off if you need to. Now remember, an angel food cake pan isn't perfectly perpendicular. It does have a bit of an angle, so you're never going to get a straight-sided cake using an angel food cake pan unless you actually physically trim the cake, and there's no need for that. But what I want to do is first smooth it out, making sure I'm happy with it. And then I like to take a minute and pull from the outside in to get a more precise wreath-like shape from the top of the chiffon cake. Oh, you're welcome for the tips. I love that everybody on the thread today is chatting with each other. I know you're all avid bakers and have so much good information to share with each other. We are a bit of a baking community, aren't we? All right, so now that it's smooth, if you're not big into elaborate cake decorating, it's amazing how this exact same tool can make a really nice look. So I'm just gently going to press using the front of my palette knife. And like a needle on a turntable, I'm spinning. I'm pulling a little frosting. And then I'm overlapping as I work my way up the cake, like so. So it adds a lot of character and dimension. I only really pulled off a tablespoon of frosting, and now it's just got a great look to it. And if you're new to cake decorating and you're not sure about your work, it just pulls away any inconsistencies, so it looks so polished. I am leaving the top flat because the final addition, my raspberry wreath on top. So I do love a good visual cue to a dessert recipe, especially if it's a dessert you're going to put on a buffet table. If you are going to leave it unattended, it helps tell your guests what the flavor of the dessert is. Sorry, I just saw a little detail I wanted to fix up. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna set this aside because what I would rather do, if I put the raspberries on this now, it will dent the buttercream frosting. So it's a good idea to hold off on any decoration until after you've given this a little chance to chill. But the good news is everybody in my circle will get some raspberry lime chiffon cake. I have one that's chilled. And like I said, what I love about a Swiss buttercream is that it doesn't set up as firmly as an Italian. It's not as sweet as an American. And just, it takes on flavors so well. So this one has been chilled. And you'll see in the recipe and in the picture, I have a combination of sugared and fresh raspberries. And so you want to make sure your raspberries are at room temperature. And when it comes to raspberries, I don't like to do the egg white and sugar because I find it's just too heavy and thick on the berries. But if the berries have a little moisture to them, you can just dip their tops in granulated sugar and they'll look frosted. But that said, just a simple fresh raspberry is absolutely gorgeous. And look it, we wondered, Michael and I wondered, could I actually assemble, make, and do this entire Swiss meringue cake in under an hour? And here we are, we're doing it. I'm on the finishing touches. Now, if you're serving this to entertain, of course, you can do this part ahead of time. And the nice thing about a Swiss meringue buttercream is it can sit out at room temperature for a while. So don't be afraid to pull out this cake. I do like to pull it out at least a half an hour before I want to serve it, but it can sit on a buffet table for a good couple of hours and it won't change its shape. The buttercream doesn't change its character because remember, you cooked the egg whites and sugar together to give that meringue base stability. So, do the last few berries here. Of course, the number of berries you use depends on the size of them and the season and how big your wreath is, because you could cover the entire top. I did pick up some mint leaves. They're definitely not growing in my garden this time of year. But the little green just gives it that Christmas wreath polish. Ah, good. Okay, I'm just reading the questions, the last few questions as I'm finishing up here. Can we make this in a regular pan so we don't have the hole in the middle? If we can, how do we peel away from the base and the bottom? That's a very good question to ask, Claude. I would make a smaller version of the recipe. You would have to have a very large cake pan. You could bake it in multiple, like I would say this would fit into 2 9 or 10-inch cake pans. My recommendation, you don't grease the pan. Put a sheet of parchment. I would use a springform pan if you can. Put a sheet of parchment at the bottom of the pan so you know it won't stick, but still leave the sides ungreased because you need that cake to climb. Then when it comes time to take it out of the pan, you run the palette knife around the inside to loosen the cake from the sides, but you know the bottom will be released. Turn it upside down, peel off the paper, and you should be all set to go. That is a very sad mint leaf. That has to go. Just a couple more here. All right, I think we are looking ready for the holidays. Look at that gorgeous cake. It really does match the picture, which we like in a recipe. And you know, when I take photos of the recipe, I don't cheat. I never double a recipe or change the proportions or add anything non-edible. It's meant to be the recipe because I want you to make it and I want you to feel confident about making it. So of course, I always want to share a slice so you can see inside. Let me just get my offset here. And I'm just going to take a peek at our cake to see how it's coming along. Now, this is something, do not do this at home, but I just want to be able to show you, how long has this cake been in, Michael? About half an hour?
35.
35 minutes. So it still has to go in for a fair bit. But there's what the chiffon cake looks like out of the oven. I'm going to pop it right back in. Have you got a shot of it? All right. It does turn on the surface quite a dark golden brown, so don't be surprised at that. Now it's time for a slice of cake. This one I'll probably divide up amongst friends and neighbors because I don't think I'm going to serve a cake with a big slice out of it for the big Christmas dinner. And there we go. Oh, I just love, it's simple but complex at the same time. We've built in all that moisture and flavor. It's a great make ahead. So, you know, maybe if you're not making this, if you don't celebrate Christmas, but you want something fun and fancy for New Year's, you can make this days ahead. And it will stay fresh for a long, long time. I'm so glad so many of you joined me. The turnout for this live stream has been fabulous, and your comments are so lovely. Everyone, I love that you're sharing baking information amongst each other. It is always my goal to share what I love to do so dearly with you. For me, it's a gift when we get a chance to connect like this. So I really hope you give this recipe a try. I know you can do it. You've got all the techniques here. You can go back and rewatch this video and make it step by step. Hit pause, catch up, and you'll have this recipe in the oven and frosted before you know it. I wish you happy, happy holidays, everyone, and I will see you in 2023. Happy New Year. And the flavor of a buttercream comes out because as the butter melts, that's when the flavor wakes up. So you get that lime kick first from the cake, but then it's the raspberry that is actually the final taste. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad I picked this recipe. It is so good. And it's amazing what the yogurt will do. And it makes you feel kind of healthy about this, doesn't it? Happy New Year, everyone. And thank you to Rolling Meadows.